The text came through at 3:47 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. Family celebration tonight, 7 p.m. sharp. Important news about the expansion. Don't be late, Dad. I stared at my phone in the middle of my office, a half smile playing at my lips. It had been 8 months since I had heard from any of them. 8 months since my company's Series B funding announcement, where I had stood on that stage alone, scanning the crowd for faces that never appeared. My older brother Jason had texted the morning of, "Can't make it, networking event. You understand?" My younger brother Tyler didn't even bother with an excuse, just silence. Mom's message came 2 hours before the press conference. "Your father isn't feeling well. We'll celebrate your little project another time, sweetie." But Dad had been well enough to attend Tyler's influencer launch party that same weekend. I had seen the photos on Instagram. Now, suddenly, there was an important family matter. I knew exactly what had changed. Yesterday morning, Forbes had published its annual tech hospitality feature. My face was on page 3. My company, Luminous Days, had just been valued at $92 million. And now, Dad wanted dinner. I texted back, "I'll be there." Before we get into the showdown, drop a comment. Where are you listening from right now? I want to see how far our community reaches. I pulled up to the country club at exactly 7 o'clock in the evening in my beat-up sedan. I had bought a luxury SUV 6 months ago, but I left it in the garage. Driving this old car to family events was a calculated decision, a way to maintain the baseline. They expected the struggling daughter, the one who was trying to find her way, so I gave her to them. It made them feel superior, and when people feel superior, they get careless. The valet looked at my car with a sneer, but I tossed him a 20 and walked toward the entrance. The heavy oak doors swung open, releasing a blast of air conditioning that smelled like old money and floor wax. As I walked down the hallway toward the private dining room, my heart rate didn't spike. My palms didn't sweat. I was calm. But beneath the calm, there was a question nagging at me. Why did I come? I knew who they were. I knew they only called when they needed something. So why was I walking back into the lion's den? It wasn't stupidity. I wasn't naive. I realized then that I was caught in the trap of normalizing cruelty. You see, when you grow up in a house where love is transactional, you don't learn to walk away from pain. You learn to accommodate it. You normalize the disrespect because acknowledging it would mean admitting that the people who are supposed to love you actually view you as a resource, not a person. It is a specific kind of psychological conditioning. You tell yourself that if you just show up one more time, if you just achieve one more milestone, if you just prove your worth one more time, the dynamic will shift. You become addicted to the hope of a different ending. It is like gambling. You keep putting chips on the table, thinking the next hand will be the one where they finally see you. But the house always wins. I stopped at the door to the private room. I could hear them laughing inside. The sound was loud, performative. It was the sound of people who believed they were untouchable. I adjusted my jacket, took a breath, and reminded myself of the truth. I wasn't here to win their approval anymore. I wasn't here to gamble. I was here to close the casino. I pushed the door open. The room was bathed in warm golden light. The table was set for 6. Dad, Mom, Jason, Tyler, and Uncle Jeffrey were already seated. They looked like a portrait of suburban success. Dad was wearing his favorite navy suit, the one he wore when he was trying to close a deal. Uncle Jeffrey, the family's self-proclaimed financial genius, was pouring champagne. "There she is," Dad's voice boomed, echoing off the walls. "The prodigal daughter returns." He stood up, arms wide, performing the role of the welcoming patriarch. Mom rushed over, her heels clicking on the parquet floor, and pulled me into a hug that smelled of expensive perfume and Chardonnay. "We've missed you so much, Morgan," she whispered, pulling back to inspect me. "You look tired. Are you eating enough? That startup lifestyle must be exhausting." "I'm fine, Mom," I said, stepping out of her reach. "Actually, I've never been better." "Well, sit, Dad commanded, gesturing to the empty chair at the far end of the table. We ordered the vintage Dom Perignon. Nothing but the best for tonight. I sat down. I looked at the bottle. 1998, $300 a bottle. I knew for a fact that their motel chain, Lakeside Resorts, hadn't turned a profit in 3 quarters. They were drinking credit card debt. So, Jason said, leaning back in his chair with a smirk. We saw the article. 92 million valuation. Not bad for a little travel app. Of course, valuation isn't cash, is it? It's just paper money until you exit. It's a solid start, Uncle Jeffrey added, swirling his glass. But hospitality is a brutal game, Morgan. Technology is a bubble. Real wealth is in assets, brick and mortar, like what your father and I have built. I took a sip of water. Is that why we're here? I asked, keeping my voice level. To discuss my bubble? Don't be defensive, Tyler chimed in, not looking up from his phone. They're just giving you advice. You should listen. Dad's been in this game for 30 years. We're here to celebrate, Dad interrupted, raising his glass. To family and to the future, specifically the future of Lakeside Resorts. They all raised their glasses. I didn't touch mine. We have big news, Mom said, beaming. We're expanding. We're finally going to turn the flagship property into a luxury destination. A spa, a golf course, the works. It is going to be the jewel of the state. That sounds expensive, I said. It takes money to make money, Dad said, his smile tightening just a fraction. We've got the vision. We've got the experience. We just need to bridge the gap to get the zoning permits finalized. Once we break ground, the investors will come pouring in. I looked around the table. They were all nodding, feeding off each other's delusion. They genuinely believed that their outdated, crumbling motels were one golf course away from being the Ritz-Carlton. They were performing success for an audience of one. Me. And that, Dad said, setting his glass down with a heavy thud, is where you come in, Morgan. The air in the room shifted. The celebration was over. The pitch had begun. We want to give you an opportunity, Uncle Jeffrey said, leaning forward, his eyes gleaming with greed. A chance to buy into the legacy. We know your liquidity is tied up in your app, but you have access to credit. You have status now. We need a bridge loan, Dad said. 1.5 million just to clear the initial hurdles. We'll pay you back with interest once the construction financing hits. But more importantly, we'll give you a seat at the table. You'll be a partner in a real business. I stared at him. $1.5 million. They weren't asking. They were bestowing a favor. You want me to lend you $1.5 million? I repeated. Invest, Jason corrected. Invest in your family. Look, Morgan, we know you've had a little luck with your tech thing, but let's be honest. You don't have the vision for long-term operations. You're good at coding, maybe. But this is empire building. And frankly, Mom added, her voice dropping to a guilt-inducing whisper, after everything we've done for you, the support, the education, it feels right that you contribute. We carried you for a long time, honey. Now it is your turn to help carry the load. I almost laughed. They carried me? I paid my own tuition. I started my company with savings I scraped together while working 2 jobs. They hadn't invested a dime. In fact, when I asked Dad for advice on my first pitch deck 3 years ago, he told me to get a real job and stop playing pretend. You have capital, Dad said, his voice hard. But you have no vision. You have no legacy. We're offering you both. I looked at my father. I looked at the sweat beading on his upper lip. I looked at the way Uncle Jeffrey's hand shook slightly as he held his glass. And suddenly, I didn't see a powerful patriarch. I saw a desperate man trying to sell me a ticket to the Titanic. I'm going to stop you right there, I said, my voice cool and even. There is no legacy. Dad blinked. What? There is no legacy, I repeated, opening the leather portfolio I'd brought with me. Lakeside Resorts has been insolvent for 18 months. Your debt-to-equity ratio is catastrophic. You haven't expanded because you can't. No bank will touch you. I slid a document across the table. It was a credit report. Your occupancy rates are down 40% year over year, I continued, reciting the numbers from memory. Your flagship property needs $3 million in deferred maintenance just to pass safety inspections. You don't need a bridge loan for expansion. You need a miracle to avoid bankruptcy. How dare you? Uncle Jeffrey sputtered, his face flushing red. These are private business matters. You have no right. I have every right, I said, cutting him off. Because you just asked me for $1.5 million based on a lie. You're not building an empire, Dad. You're digging a grave. Dad slammed his hand on the table, rattling the expensive champagne flutes. You ungrateful little... Who do you think you are coming in here flashing your little tech money, disrespecting your family? You think you're smarter than us because you got lucky with an app? It wasn't luck, I said. And it wasn't my family's money. We gave you everything, Mom cried, tears welling up on cue. We sacrificed so much. You sacrificed nothing, I said, my voice dropping lower, colder. I worked 3 jobs in college. I slept in my car for 2 weeks when I started Luminous Days because I couldn't afford rent. When I asked you for help then, just a co-signature on an apartment, not even money, you told me to learn responsibility. And you did, Dad shouted. Look at you now. We made you tough. I looked at him. Really looked at him. His face was twisted in rage, veins bulging in his neck. And in that moment, I understood the illusion of power, of the empty wallet. You see, my father had always derived his authority from his perceived status as the provider, the businessman, the patriarch. He shouted, he demanded, he belittled because he needed to project strength to cover the fact that he was failing. His anger wasn't strength, it was a defensive mechanism. It was the roar of a paper tiger. He was posturing, trying to use volume to compensate for a lack of value. He believed that if he acted like the boss, I would revert to being the subordinate daughter. But power isn't about who can yell the loudest. It is about who holds the leverage. And for the first time in my life, I realized his pockets were empty and mine were full. His authority was a ghost haunting a building that had already been condemned. I'm not lending you the money, I said, closing my portfolio. And I'm not investing. Then you're dead to us, Dad screamed, standing up so abruptly his chair tipped over. You walk out that door without writing that check, and you're no daughter of mine. You're nothing. The door to the private room opened. Sorry to interrupt, a calm voice said. It was Elena, my CFO. She walked in looking impeccable in a sharp gray suit, holding a thick manila folder. She didn't look at my family. She walked straight to me. The paperwork is finalized, Morgan, she said, handing me the folder. The transfer just cleared. Who is this? Mom demanded, wiping her eyes. This is Elena, I said, taking the folder. She handles my acquisitions. Acquisitions? Jason laughed nervously. What are you acquiring? Another app? I opened the folder and pulled out the deed. No, I said. I bought the note. Silence fell over the room. Absolute, suffocating silence. What note? Dad whispered, his face draining of color. The banknote on Lakeside Resorts, I explained, my voice steady. You've been in default for 4 months. The bank was about to foreclose. They packaged your debt and sold it to a private investment firm last week. That firm is a subsidiary of Luminous Days. I placed the deed on the table, right next to the bottle of Dom Perignon. I didn't just refuse your loan, Dad. I bought your debt. I own the mortgage, the land, and the liabilities. I own you. I watched the realization hit them one by one. Uncle Jeffrey slumped in his chair, looking like a deflated balloon. Jason stared at the document, his mouth open. Mom put a hand over her mouth to stifle a sob. And Dad? Dad just stared at me. The rage was gone, replaced by a terrifying emptiness. The illusion was shattered. The patriarch was gone. All that was left was a man who owed his daughter $6.5 million. You can't do this, he stammered. We're family. Yes, I said. We are, which is why I'm not evicting you immediately. I'm giving you 30 days to vacate the premises. I'm turning the flagship property into a Luminous Days wellness retreat. It is the only way to make the land profitable again. 30 days? Mom wailed. But this is our life. This is our legacy. It was a failing business, I said. Now it is a solvent one. I pulled a check from the folder. This is for $200,000, I said, placing it on the table. Consider it a buyout. It is more than the equity is worth, which is zero. It is enough to rent a nice condo and start over. Take it. Dad looked at the check. He looked at me. I saw the war in his eyes. Pride versus survival. I won't take your charity, he spat. It is not charity, I said. It is severance. The room erupted. Mom was crying, begging Dad to take the check. Uncle Jeffrey was yelling at Dad for ruining everything. Jason and Tyler were arguing about who was going to lose their trust funds. It was chaos. It was ugly. And I just watched. I stood up, smoothed my jacket, and walked toward the door. They didn't even notice me leaving. They were too busy tearing each other apart over the scraps I'd left them. I walked out of the country club and into the cool night air. Elena was waiting by my car, my real car, the sleek black SUV. She opened the door for me. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, exhaling a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 10 years. "I am." I got in and started the engine. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. "We can fix this. Please, Morgan, just come back inside." I looked at the message. For a second, I felt that old pull, the habit of hope, the desire to be the good daughter, to fix it, to save them. But then I remembered the important family discussion. I remembered the bridge loan. I remembered that they only loved me when they thought I was useful. I deleted the message. Then I blocked the number. As I drove away, watching the country club disappear in my rearview mirror, I realized something profound. This wasn't just about winning. It wasn't just about the money or the property. It was a narrative victory. I had spent my whole life as a supporting character in their drama. The disappointment, the invisible one, the failure. By buying their debt, by forcing their hand, I hadn't just defeated them. I had rewritten the story. I was no longer the daughter they rejected. I was the author of their fate. I had removed them from my story. They were no longer the antagonists. They were just gone. Irrelevant footnotes in a biography that was just beginning. I turned onto the highway, the city lights stretching out before me like a field of stars. I was free. Have you ever had to outgrow a place or a person to save yourself? Tell me your story in the comments. And if you believe in building your own worth, hit that like button.